So, folks, I am back at it again with another wonderful call from the Transatlantic Call-In Show, a show that I co-host over on the line. I recommend you all go check it out. Link down in the description below, along with a link to the original episode where this aired. I'm a co-host on this show in this particular episode with Dr. Ben, wonderful, insightful, knowledgeable man. Go check it out. It's wonderful. Got some contentious calls, got some friendly calls, got some really constructive calls. Go check out the line. They have many other shows over there as well. And also, of course, check out the Transatlantic Call-In Show. It's every week on Thursdays. Go check it out. And like, comment, subscribe, hit the like button here, hit the like comment, hit the like comments over there as well. And comments longer than 8 words, obviously helping the algorithm a little bit better. But all that being said, subscribe to both channels too. It's just one click. Boom, 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 boom. Go do it. I believe in you. I believe in your ability to click buttons. And if this show sounds interesting, make sure to check us out live every Thursday. And also, if you got questions or you got comments or you got things you want to debate about trans people, call in. That's the entire point of the show. It is a call-in show where anything you want to ask about trans people is on the table. So go do that. And I hope you enjoy this call.
Let's talk to Sam. They, them from Arizona. Sam, you are live on the line with Dr. Ben and Riverboat Jack. What do you want to talk about today?
Hi. So I guess a bit of backstory on the topic. I'm non-binary, and my parents are kind of transphobic, definitely. And my stepdad gave me this book called Binary by Zachary Elliott. Do you know it?
I don't, but that sounds not great.
No, I am unfamiliar with this one.
Sorry?
Oh no, I just pulled it up now, and that's my reaction to this. This looks like some propaganda for sure.
Yeah, and I tried to tell him, I think it's written by an architect, that's trying to pretend to be a biologist, basically. It's weird, but I have been reading through it and trying to go through all of the citations and all the sources and kind of disprove it scientifically. So I was hoping to just kind of ask some questions about kind of the idea of the sex spectrum.
Yeah, what questions do you have?
Lay it on us.
Okay, cool. All right, so what this guy says is that sex is a binary because even though there are intersex people, he doesn't define sex as based on chromosomes or anything. He says that sex is the phenotype that produces one of the two gametes.
Yeah, that whole argument is garbage, because what is that? What does that mean? And this is a technique, or really it's a fallacy called moving the goalposts. Have you heard of that before?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so essentially what has happened with this whole argument is they started by saying that sex is about what's in your pants, your anatomy that a doctor saw at birth and said, you are a boy, you're a girl. And then once people started pointing out, hey, there are people who aren't easy to figure out, or have their external parts that don't align with their internal parts. And so then they said, okay, well, that argument doesn't work. So, but what about their chromosomes? And then it points out that, hey, well, chromosomes don't always line up that way either. And then they'll say, oh, but what about your gametes? And they're like, okay, well, not everybody has gametes. So then what do you do with those people? And then so finally they've landed on, no, it's the body type that's organized around producing certain gametes. So they don't, the thing is, they can't pinpoint one factor that is consistent for everybody who is a man and everybody who is a woman, based on biological characteristics. And so moving the goalpost, they have to constantly come up with new ways to define what they mean, because none of them actually prove their point. And one of the arguments that Katie Montgomery would give very frequently, which I have stolen because I love it, it's if you're going to define what a chair is, like there's no concise or like really good way to define a chair that includes all chairs and excludes all non-chairs. So that's the same thing with this. Like you kind of have to point to one particular characteristic that locks you in to this binary, and that doesn't exist. And so if someone makes the point of a phenotype organized around certain gametes, what parts of the phenotype do they mean? Because that sends us right back into the anatomical argument. This all goes in a giant circle because all of these are different variables that all feed in together to give different combinations of effects. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I get that.
And I pointed this out with an earlier caller, but I would just point out, going to the author of that book's social media, he's bringing up Imane Khalif, and it becomes very apparent just from like the first post that this idea that you can separate people by this kind of bullshit categorization is just a way for him to launder his transphobia. Like he's like, well, Imane Khalif has a Y chromosome, so that means he. And it's just like Imane Khalif is a woman. Like she was raised her entire life as a woman, and like this is just a way where you can be like, oh, you have a rare genetic condition. Well, guess what? You're trans now, except in a transphobic way. Like that's like the exact argument that they're making whenever they default to these kinds of biological essentialism.
Yeah, definitely. The whole discussion around Imane Khalif right now is pissing me off because it's really frustrating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. What other questions do you have?
Yeah.
I was also wondering, so in a lot of, I think, videos just like on the line in general around sex and gender, I think you guys mentioned like there's a biological consensus that sex and gender are two separate things and that sex is on a spectrum. And I was kind of wondering, like, is there any way to kind of prove a biological, like a scientific consensus?
It's not something necessarily that you prove. I mean, the ideas of the consensus are things that largely have been proven. But to prove whether or not there is a consensus maybe is a bit more difficult to do. But something that is a tactic kind of these kinds of authors and also a tactic of the current administration is this idea that if you have an expert that contradicts the consensus, then that is equally like that person can go toe to toe with the consensus and debunk the consensus, which is not true because the consensus isn't from one person. It is the collective opinion of like the majority of the expert board of a particular field. And so in order to really arrive at the consensus, there are mountains and mountains and mountains of studies that kind of support what ends up being the consensus. So it's kind of a lot of an undertaking to scrub through every single thing that kind of leads to that. But I think if you're looking for what is a particular consensus or what are people saying, there are certain expert boards like that you can go to their websites and see what they collectively say about the issue. For example, a lot of, if we're talking about medical related issues, any of the medical boards, so like the AAFP, the which is the American Academy of Family Physicians. There's the ACP, which is for internal medicine. There's like pediatrics. Like they have their own journals and their own statements that they put out publicly. I'm sure people that write biology textbooks and that whole community has a similar thing that you can look up. It may take some clever Googling to find those resources specifically, but they're out there if you look for them.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you.
What else? What else can we help you with?
Yeah, lay it on us.
Okay, now that I'm thinking about it, there's something kind of more off topic around like hormone therapy.
Okay.
That I'm wondering about. So I feel like there's a lot of kind of fear mongering around hormone therapy and the effects that it has. But I also know that like with any medical treatment, there could be side effects and things like that. So I guess, what would you say about the effects that hormone therapy could have on a person and like the risks that come with it?
As it depends on what hormones you're taking. It depends on what age you are when you're taking them. Kind of the big risks, like if we divide the medications into a couple of different categories, there are puberty blockers, which are not hormone therapy. That's a separate discussion from masculinizing or feminizing hormone therapy. And so a lot of the more irreversible side effects are more present with masculinizing hormone therapy than they are with feminizing hormone therapy. Because if you think about what does it mean to go through a testosterone dominant puberty, right? Those are a lot of the side effects, if you will, of that trans women experience after, if they go through their own endogenous puberty, and they have a difficult and often painful time trying to counteract some of those things. So things like voice changes, face structure changes, like height changes really don't happen as an adult. But if you start in adolescence, then you might get changes in your height, that kind of thing. And those are like, even hair growth is not completely irreversible, but once you start growing a significant amount of hair, it can be difficult to dial that back. So that's not entirely reversible. Whereas some of the side effects, like fat redistribution, is largely reversible, which you're going to get with both testosterone and estrogen. Things like skin softening, that's going to be pretty reversible. So a lot of the estrogen effects and progesterone effects and stuff are fairly reversible. One of the bigger concerns, depending on when you start taking these things too, is kind of risks for fertility that we don't we don't know for sure is like a universal risk, but maybe a risk for certain people, especially people who take testosterone. If you only have so many ova that you can produce, and so there's some risk that once your ovaries kind of atrophy, as the case with a lot of people who are on long-term testosterone therapy, there are some concerns of fertility preservation. And I think that's one of the bigger ones that I talk with patients about before they decide to go on these therapies. So does that kind of help?
Yes, it kind of more so when I like kind of talked about going on HRT. My mom brought up an example of someone that she knew that which like obviously that's anecdotal, but she said like they started to transition medically and then they started to detransition and then they ended up getting cancer and just like having basically medical issues for the rest of their. I don't know if that's like a widespread thing where like.
Yeah, so cancer is not caused by hormone therapy. That is a myth. So if a person got cancer after having hormone therapy, you have to think like correlation versus causation thing. Just because something happened before the event does not mean that that thing caused the event. So you have to wonder, does that person have risk factors for cancer? And there is something to think about with breast cancer risk. Like if you already have breast cancer and you have a type that is responsive to estrogen or progesterone, that would be a reason to not take those medications. But that's, again, where medical evaluation comes into play. So somebody who already has a cancer diagnosis might not be given those types of therapies, or they might have extra discussion about informed consent with taking that. But will it cause you to have cancer if you don't already? No, it's not going to do that.
And it's also worth pointing out that like cisgender people also take testosterone and estrogen in various circumstances, and by and large, unless they're doping for weightlifting or something like that, aren't experiencing some of the more fear mongered about effects. Like if you're taking way above the recommended dosage of just about anything, you're gonna run into some weird effects. And but for the purposes of transition, by and large, again, especially with doctor supervision, it's pretty safe.
Yeah, and even that if someone starts to transition and doesn't like the effects, like I said, a lot of the outcomes of feminizing transition are like largely reversible. Even something like breast growth, you can get a breast reduction or a mastectomy. You can still do that. We do that for cis boys who have gynecomastia. So that's something we can do. But on the testosterone side, let's say you start testosterone and then a few weeks later you decide you don't want to do it anymore. You're not going to have some of these big changes right away for most people. Like even voice changes are going to take months to set in. Kind of the first thing that really starts to happen is like body hair growth, which everybody has body hair, or at least most people have body hair. So like whether you have more arm or leg hair or whatever, you can, it's like there's not much to say. Like there's some people who are cis that just have higher amounts of body hair. So that shouldn't really even be a worrying factor. So if somebody started testosterone and then stopped like within a few weeks, like they're probably not going to really experience a whole lot of effects in general.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That helps a lot.
And it's also worth noting that generally speaking, anyone who goes on HRT is getting like routine blood work done to look for any kind of warning signs that something might be amiss in their endocrine system. So like
Yep.
it is not what folks fearmonger about.
Okay. Yeah, because that makes sense. Just like with any kind of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, and so it's worth having the discussion. Like if you're interested in that, at least sitting down and getting a consult, and then you can see if it's something you want to do or if you don't want to do. So that's the beautiful thing about informed consent is being able to make that decision for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Then I had one last thing about like the sex spectrum and like the sex binary. And so at a certain point, he discusses how intersex people are getting like surgeries done on them as infants. And he very briefly discusses and says that the idea of the sex spectrum would lead to more of those instances happening and would lead to more of that environment, which I disagree with, because if we think of sex as binary, then anybody that has like anything outside of typical male or typical female, like just genitalia at birth, doctors and parents will want them to conform more to this idea of the binary.
Yep. We're seeing less. We're seeing less of those procedures now. Now that there's more of a movement for bodily autonomy and saying, hey, you can let that child wait until they can make their own decision of if they want that procedure. Like, there's very few conditions where you have to do something at birth, and that's where if it's dangerous. But in those cases, you correct the dangerous part, and then you leave the rest for when the child can consent.
Right. Yeah. But a lot of it was just like appearance.
Yeah.
And like I like the most charitable towards that position you can be is that sex is a bimodal spectrum, like that it's a different kind of spectrum that tends to clump up in two groups, but that's not representative of where sex is for all people.
Right. And he kind of tries to say that, because he talks about the bimodal kind of distribution idea of the sex, and he tries to say that like sex spectrum theorists are trying to like separate sex into the phenotype and the karyotype and just like all of these different factors when it's just this one thing. And so like I guess that's just a misunderstanding of what sex is biologically. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're correct on that.
You're nailing it.
Well, with that, I wish we could have more discussion. We do have to move on before the end of the show. But if you have any more questions, definitely call back in next week and we can address some more of these for you.
Awesome. No, I think you helped so much. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good rest of your day, Sam.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, here we are again. End of the episode. But you know what? It doesn't have to be the end of the calls that you watch, because you can click a link down in the description to the full episode where you can watch all of the calls all at once, some that may not have even come out yet on this channel. So go do that if you're interested. Otherwise, well, not otherwise. Also, hit the like button here. Leave a comment what you thought about the call down below here. Comments longer than 8 words really help. And also leave a comment over there, because comments help that show to grow too. And our goal is to grow both these shows. So also call in, of course, every Thursday if you feel inclined. Yeah. Also, there's merch. I don't know that I've mentioned that there's merch yet. There's merch. If you look down below, there's merch and a Patreon for the line. Go check it out. And we could do more cool stuff. I don't know. How's your day going? Good, I hope. This is a good outro. And I hope you all have a good day. Let's keep on going. Why was I vamping for like a whole minute? I don't know. Oh, God.
Riverboat deck is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the scenes. Politics, gaming, plenty more. Her sense of fashion